Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology turned podcast. Everyone, welcome into the program. I hope that you're doing well today and you are ready for today's program because we have the one, the only Mr. Ralph Bond joining us here in just a moment to talk all about 4 great stories. And if you've missed the segments, obviously we mentioned this before, but he's been on vacation. We'll talk a little bit about that. And ladies and gentlemen, but we're back at it with a lot of great stories that, for Friday, I can't think of a better way to do it because, if we aren't all done, making fun of the UK and what's happening over there or, paying attention to the horrible, horrible things happening over in Russia and Ukraine or, just so many things out there that don't make you feel good after hearing them. Well, today's segment is the opposite of that. We're here to make you feel a little bit better. So everyone, computeramerica.com, that's where you'll find everything, including past shows, future shows, show notes, links, articles, reviews, podcasts, all that and more. Everything, computeramerica.com. is where is the best place to keep up with everything that we do here at the program. And also we have a link to Ralph's website, which will have links to everything that he does along with show notes. Those are super important because obviously these stories are going to be a little condensed, but everyone, it should be a good gist. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead, bring on Ralph and get the show started. So everyone, once again, he is of course the voice of Intel Digital Minute if you've been around that long, and if you haven't, he is our regular contributor to Computer America for a long time, Mr. Ralph Bond. Ralph, how you doing?
Hey, great to be back. And we'll kick things off with 2 stories about MIT, but just a couple of things talking about Intel. My days when I was with Intel many years ago, I was laid off in 2006 after almost 14 years with those guys and then ended my career with Autodesk, as you know, Ben. Mm-hmm. But sad news coming out of Intel. Pat Gelsinger, current CEO, announced that on November the 1st, they're going to have to do thousands of layoffs. Oh, boy, my heart goes out to those people. Happy holidays for them. Oh, no.
Yeah,
and that's sad.
And this would obviously go into more of like a general segment that we do here on the show, but also Intel is looking, or I'm sorry, not Intel. Wow, Twitter is looking at about a 75% layoff.
Yeah.
Like, 3/4 of its entire workforce might get laid off there, and and I was reading articles about this, Ralph. Like, it's a weird where in the United States we have this labor shortage where there's a lot of positions that can't be filled, and tech companies are having to deal with a slowing economy, and they have to lay a bunch of people off. So it's like can't find workers, but also we have too many workers, and it's a weird balance that these companies have to do. So
it is tough.
Yeah, I'm sure no company wants to do something like that, but like I said, that's more of a general segment, and we're here for uplifting news, not layoffs.
Yes, that's right.
So why don't you go ahead and do a little introduction for the purpose of our segment here.
That's right. And I'm glad you mentioned the fact that what you and I do on Fridays is uplifting. We're not going to leave you in a downer. If you want to worry about the dam that the Russians are planning to blow up in the Ukraine and kill millions of people, no, that's not where we're going. How terrible that is.
Not our jurisdiction, right?
Not our jurisdiction today. Okay, so Ben, as you know, of course, I'm an aggregator of science and tech news features I find by monitoring a host of online news outlets all the time, walking the dog, got the smartphone out, checking and it drives my wife nuts. I look for important stories that don't usually capture mainstream press attention. And sometimes these stories can be kind of wacky and wild and out there. But most of the time, they're things that sort of fly under the radar. And I'm always on the lookout for news that gives a glimpse into where we're headed in robotics, medical technology, sustainable energy technology, transportation advances, space research, physics, you name it, it's all across the board. And what I do with each news item is present the essential points in the show notes. Folks, come out to computeramerica.com, get the show notes for today's show. And what we do is we boil it down to just a few digestible important points that pretty much anyone can understand, even if you don't have a science or tech background. And I stress to our audience to check out the show notes, as I just mentioned, because I'll have links to the articles, images, all this good stuff if you want to dive deeper, because believe me, there's always a lot more information in the articles than what Ben and I are going to be able to share with you right now. And so with that said, the first story is all about MIT's, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, their new museum, which opened on the 2nd of this month, October 2nd. And for me, I couldn't have stressed this more. It's a must-see for all devoted geeks like me and Ben. Mm-hmm. If you go to Boston, go to Cambridge, which is just, right there in Boston. You can get off the subway. It's very, very easy. And go and see this new museum. And also, this is based on my personal experience because, as Ben mentioned, for the last 2 Fridays, I was not with the show because my wife and I went to Cape Cod and went to Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard and all that sort of stuff.
Sounds like a great time.
It was a great time. And a lot of people asked me, did you see any migrants flown into Martha's Vineyard from Texas? No, we didn't. But I did see the airport.
And that whole thing did make a lot of headlines, but people also have to remember that, it was about 100 people, and 100 people sounds like a lot, but that's a very, very small drop in the bucket compared to, a lot of bigger populations.
Yes. So as I mentioned,
funny that they would ask you, but I mean, overall, was your trip good? I mean,
it was great.
COVID's not over, but I'm sure traveling is still kind of a little scary, but at the same time, exciting because, hey, you get to go back out in the world.
Well, yeah. And one of the things that we were so lucky, we arrived in Cape Cod or in Massachusetts right after the remaining after effects of the Ian from the great, terrible hurricane. Mm-hmm. And so the weather was just fantastic, like low 70s and stuff, and clear, a little bit cloudy maybe in the morning. But we were so fortunate because that was one of the wild cards about going there at this time of year. It could be snowing for that. Now, who knows, right? So we were super lucky on that. And we ended our trip after really touring all of Cape Cod and driving and taking ferry boats over to the Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, all this good stuff. We ended our trip with a weekend, Friday and Saturday in Boston. And that's where I got onto the MIT thing. But we walked, of course, we did the famous Freedom Trail. If you're not familiar with that, just Google the Freedom Trail in downtown Boston. It's where you go around and see all the historic buildings and sites where the Revolutionary War stuff was going on, and everything is really interesting. One of the things that you'll see, which would blew my mind, is Paul Revere's home, which still is there. It's a wooden structure too, friends, not brick. A wooden structure still there. Get this. It was built in 1680.
It's pretty crazy. And of course,
you're showing the website. That's great.
Showing the website, and I probably have to reload it. But I think is it this one right here? Right here on the
left? That's it. And can you believe it? So looking at that thing was built in 1680. So I think my wife said it was like 120 something years old. It was an old building when Paul Revere's family moved in. I mean, it's just like, what?
And it's always fun talking to Europeans as well, because they'll, you see something like that and you're like, oh yeah, from 1700, something like that. And then you talk to Europeans and they're like, yeah, my grandma's basement was built by the Vikings in, 200 BC. I'm like, what's the point? Like, it's, I guess America's idea of ancient history is much different than European ancient history.
And to your point, as Westerners, I was born in Hartford, Connecticut, but our family moved to LA when I was very young. But anyway, as Westerners, we look at dates in Oregon, for example. My daughter and I were talking about this after our trip. She didn't come with us, but I was sharing with her some of the architectural stuff because she's interested in that. And for us, anything in Oregon that exists that was built before the Civil War is like, oh my God, that's so old. And then you go back to New England, to your point, anything, they laugh because they've got tons of stuff that goes way back to the early 1600s, right? And then your point about Europe, you'll go to Europe and they go, well, but there's a Roman ruin down the street that's, 2,000 something years old. So it's all relative.
Yeah. The pub right down the road's been around since 1200, and they still have the original door, stuff like that. Yeah.
There you go. Anyway, back to the story. So as much as the Freedom Trail was wonderful, and friends, I do recommend
it.
It was great,
but I'm glad you're back.
But the big thrill for me was the Massachusetts Institute of Technology new museum. And in the show notes, we have a link for you to go and see that. Ben is probably going to pull that up and show that to you if he hasn't already done so. And here's the deal. It's an ultra modern, I mean, it is exquisitely beautiful, 56,000 square foot facility at the Cambridge campus that documents the Institute's innovations in science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, starting with its founding. And I didn't realize how old this institution is. It was founded in 1861 at the beginning of the Civil War. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know if there's a corollary with whether it was founded to help develop technology for the war or was just coincidental. But anyway, 1861. So the museum's galleries feature interactive displays. That's the key. A lot of interactive displays that let users do seriously geeky stuff, like manipulate the genomes of virtual mice or work with neural networks that learn how to recognize facial expressions. And of course, as I said in the show notes here, I loved it all. And for example, in the artificial intelligence exhibit area, which is really interesting, I collaborated with an AI computer to compose a poem on the fly. What would happen is I would write a line of just random, poem thing, and the computer would come back, and it was like dealing with another human being. It was so freaky. It was a very trippy experience. And then overall, Ben, what surprised me was the museum's hands-on learning labs. So they have exhibits, interactive exhibits, but they also have hands-on learning labs. I was looking in the windows and watching people building things and doing stuff as groups, and maker spaces, in addition to the sheer amazing number of engaging interactive exhibits. So, wow. One of the super geekiest interactive exhibits that my wife and I played around with is one where it goes through this one genius doctor in mathematics, her equation to help calculate the idea of how many life-supporting exoplanets there might be. And it was a really interesting thing. You can actually manipulate her equation if you want interactively. It's very, very geeky. I don't profess to understand it at all, really. But it was a fun and interesting thing. And please, friends, if you go to Boston, is you can take the T is their subway system. T is in Tom. Right. You can take it and get to the Kendall. I think it's the Kendall Cambridge station. Just get off, short walk. You're right there at MIT. So please go and see that if you're heading to Boston in the future.
Yeah. By the way, is that the Drake? And this is purely Google. I do not claim to know this off the top of my head. Is it the Drake equation that lets you kind of estimate how many habitable planets there are in the universe?
It might be. I know it was developed by a woman, a PhD genius who was at MIT, of course. So, right. Yep. Check it out.
and I think that's the Drake equation. But overall, still very cool. And that's, I think, the cool part about museums are doing, and I've been to a couple recently, kind of here and in Dallas and other places, that they're moving from, just stuff behind glass, which is always, kind of cool to see artifacts and stuff like that. But museums lately have been very much engaging. You turn stuff, you move stuff, you interact with the exhibits. It's not just look at all the cool old stuff behind glass. It's actually, doing stuff yourself. And it sounds like MIT, as much as, and really that's what we try to do here on the show as well, Ralph, is that, you may hear about it and it's just research and, maybe one day, but we always try to give real world implications for what can happen. So it's one thing to hear about something. It's another thing to see it in action and see it yourself. So
yeah.
Very, very
and
cool.
One other nugget about that too, Ben, is again mentioned it was founded in 1861. So part of the gallery goes way back to the beginning and shows you some of the technologies they were developing, 150 years ago. That's equally interesting. It's not just the latest bleeding edge things in genetics or AI or whatever. It also covers history. And in fact, one part of the exhibit had computer technology from the late 70s and early 80s and so forth that my wife and I looked at each other and said, boy, are we old? Because we were looking at some of this stuff. Oh, I remember that. Oh, I remember this kind of equipment and this sort of thing. If you've never seen a vacuum tube based computer, now that predates my wife and I, our activity in the tech career. But there's that stuff there too, which is really interesting for a lot of younger people who have no clue where the term debugging comes from. Yeah. It comes from women going into what was clerical women that they used at Bell Labs and other places like that would go in with tongs to pull out insects that were messing up the tubes because they literally debugging. Literally.
Yeah,
Gotta love it.
Back when computers were the size of rooms, it was.
Oh my God, yeah.
But to be fair, Ralph, technology advances very fast, and I remember even Craig had a TV that he purchased from Samsung. It was like one of the first plasma TVs ever built.
Yes.
And they actually approached Craig because they only sold a handful of them, like, in the world, and Craig paid an arm and a leg for it, but they actually bought it back from him at cost because they wanted to put it in their own museum because they only sold so many and they didn't really keep any. So technology advances so fast. But yeah, 1861. That is really incredible. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're in Boston, give it a look.
Must do it.
Definitely. So that's story number. And again, everyone links if you want to find more. And I gotta say that the MIT Museum has a great website that shows all the different exhibits and stuff like that. So even if you're not going there, you can check out the website itself. Very, very cool. So that's story
there you
number,
go.
Yeah, story number 1. Story number 2. Let's move on from MIT and let's move on to story number 2. MIT. Ralph, what's going on?
Well, yeah. So what I did on purpose was story 2 sort of gives one of the latest examples of the miracles coming out of MIT. It seems like every single week, certainly almost every day. So the headline here is MIT scientists develop robotic capsule to deliver insulin, get ready, orally, right? Orally. Ding, 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 ding. It's got this from the MIT News website, which is a wonderful website in its own right. So, of course, here's the problem. Insulin and most other so-called biologic drugs consisting of proteins or nucleic acids can't pass through the mucus barrier that lines the human digestive system. So to date, as we all know, patients must give themselves injections. Ouch. Okay, time out. What's a biologic drug? It's a substance that is made from a living organism or its products and is used in the prevention, diagnosis, or treatment of cancer and other diseases. Biological drugs include antibodies, interleukins, and vaccines, also called biologic agent or biological agent. And wait a minute, time out. Interleukin, I need to refresh. What is that? Okay, interleukins play essential roles in the activation and differentiation of immune cells, as well as the proliferation, maturation, migration, and adhesion. So they have to do with immunity. Okay, right. So that's why they're so important. Now, a new robotic drug capsule developed at MIT may one day be able to provide a painless alternative. In other words, get rid of the whole horrible thing of having to give yourself a shot, right? Yeah. Or a jab, as our British friends say. The capsule, which is about the size of a multivitamin, has a robotic cap that spins and tunnels through the mucus barrier when it reaches the small intestine, allowing drugs carried by the capsule to pass into cells lining the intestine. And the MIT research team recently demonstrated that they could use this approach to successfully deliver insulin orally. Major breakthrough. The robo capsule carries its drug payload in a small reservoir at one end, and its main body has the features that enable it to tunnel through the mucus barrier in the digestive tract. And this is a good example, Ben, of where use the links, go to the article. You'll learn so much more than what we can do here today. And after its job is done, the robo capsule dissolves. It can do this because the capsule is coated with gelatin that can be tuned to dissolve at a specific pH level after delivering the insulin. God, so brilliant. I love this stuff. Just another example, as I said here in the show notes, amazing advancements coming out of MIT every day, it seems.
Definitely. And for those who are simply listening and can't see it, they equate it to about the size of a multivitamin pill. So it's not like, it's something that has to be, really a struggle to swallow. Pretty ordinary, Ralph. And, the fact that there's even I think that's a battery. Is it? I maybe just passed that part.
At that part, I wasn't quite sure about the locomotion, how that works. And if this thing dissolves in your lower intestinal tract, what happens to it? Maybe that other stuff passes through with no problem, I hope.
Yeah. I'm guessing the other parts probably pass right on through. And I'm curious, Ralph, if maybe something like this could be tuned to deliver multiple payloads, or
sure.
essentially, multiple doses of insulin over a period of time. Something like that would be
interesting.
Because we've talked about that as well. Being able to just take one pill and have 5, 6, 7 doses in that one pill, and something like that would be very, very cool.
Oh yeah. Hey Ben, that brings up an interesting point. Thank God I don't have diabetes. I don't have a family member that deals with this. How often do patients have to give themselves a shot? Is it every day? I don't know.
So,
do you know?
The only family member that ever had diabetes was our little dog Jasmine, who had dog diabetes, and we had to give her shots twice a day. I think
twice a day. Oh my.
I think that a lot of people, if they don't have continuous monitoring, they have to do it probably something similar twice a day, and just have to make sure that their blood sugar stays a certain level. But either way, very inconvenient. So if you could turn that from like a daily thing into maybe like once every couple of days, I'm sure it could improve a lot of people's lives. So
that would be interesting. Yeah,
definitely. So
cool.
Maybe, but I am not a scientist, but the nice people over at MIT are. So very cool. Story number 2. And what's so weird is like we get the press releases and all that kind of thing, and even right here on our page, they have the press inquiry. Like we could contact this person right here and try to get them on show to do that kind of thing.
Fascinating.
They put out so much research, and at the same time, they actually do love talking about it as well. I think that's what MIT does better than a lot of other institutions. They evangelize their own stuff. They have a great press room.
Well, and hence their museum, which in itself is a magnificent evangelical thing.
Yeah, definitely. So very, very cool. Story number 2. Story number 3. Let's go ahead and continue on here to looks like we're saying, on the science side, on the biology side. And this is very, very cool because, much the same way, just using technology to not exactly change, it's not like we're using micro robots to, blast cancer cells or something like that, but more using technology to better target our medicine. And that's also important.
Yeah, so this is a great example of biotech, if you want to call it that, because the headline here is scientists create algae-based micro robots. Now, in this case, the use of the word robot is a little, loose around the edges. So,
but Merriam-Webster definition of a robot, technically.
I think Ben, a lot of times robotics is so sexy, people want to hook their wagon to that if they can. But I'm not criticizing. But again, the headline: scientists create algae-based micro robots to deliver antibiotics within the lungs, which is a big challenge. So this comes from medgadget.com, wonderful outlet. Researchers at the University of California, San Diego have developed a micro robot system to treat bacterial pneumonia. So important. The micro robots consist of living algae cells that can swim very effectively in biological fluids, such as the fluids in your lungs, allowing them to navigate through the lungs and deliver drugs to difficult to reach areas. The algae cells are studded with polymer spheres loaded with antibiotics. And these polymer spheres, in turn, are coated with cell membranes from a type of white blood cell called neutrophils, I hope I'm saying that right, that acts as your immune system's first line of defense. So again, there's so much more information in the article. Get the link and check it out in depth. This helps the algae cells to neutralize inflammatory molecules that are released by bacteria in the lungs, providing a highly targeted, that's the key, and localized anti-inflammatory effect. Now, in tests in mice with bacterial pneumonia, the algae micro-robots, successfully helped to clear the bacterial infection. But a little reality check here, all the treated mice survived for at least 30 days, whereas untreated mice died within 3 days. Now, remember, mice, I didn't have this in the show notes, but I did a quick look up before we got on air here, live from between 5 to 7 years. So is this a perfect solution? Did it make the mice live for 5 to 7 years? No, but I mean, it's a step forward, and what a clever and interesting thing to do, to use these algae cells as a transport vehicle for dispensation of antibiotics. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, and those mice, it sounds like all of them were infected with the bacterial infection in the lungs, bacterial pneumonia.
Right.
So
Right.
being able to go from 3 days to 30 days, and Ralph, maybe letting your body have a chance to fight back for
Excellent
30
point.
days instead of 3 days, I'm sure that will give you a much better chance of survival.
Yeah.
Be you rat, be you human. I'm sure a lot of people would like the extra 27 days, but still, using algae to swim through your body, it's so weird that you think about these solutions, and at the same time, I'm sure one person would just discard it and be like, "Who wants algae in the lungs?" And then the other researcher goes, "Well, now that you think about it," and then they go off and do research like this. It's very innovative.
And Ben, one thing that wasn't clear in the article, and I dug and tried to find out, is how do you administer this? Do you take a tablet that somehow dissolves and somehow these algae find their way into or is it sent down your throat? I mean, how does this? That part wasn't clear to me. So if anybody out there listening to this digs into this or happens to have research capabilities to tell us how that's done, that would be great. I mean, they talk about a tablet at one point in the video, I think you were showing for a moment, and so that's probably how it's done. They say directly take the
pill, and it's all passive from there. So
but what's interesting is does that introduce these algae cells throughout your entire body as a result, and it just hoping and waiting for some of them to get to the lungs? That part that was fuzzy for me. So, but anyway, still a really cool innovation.
Right. You would think it would be some sort of aerosol that you could just directly breathe into the lungs and something like that. But they said pills, so hey, pills are all the rage. We're quickly heading to a Jetson-like future where everything's going to be in pill form. It's going to be great. Now, with that being said, and again, there's a video there that I unfortunately only played like a little snippet of. So if you want to catch that,
check it out.
As well. Story number 4, and this one caught a lot of headlines. I'm glad that you included it, and a lot of people. And I'm not the biggest James Bond fan. That's all Craig's department, but I will say that, and I think, actually, correct me if I'm wrong. Snowpiercer, is that James Bond?
Oh gosh,
might be. But anyways, a lot of people equated this to the entire premise of the movie Snowpiercer. If you've ever seen that. So
I haven't. I'll have to check it out.
It's like exactly the same thing. Of course, it's James Bond villain, that whole thing. But yeah. So Ralph, tell us about story number 4 and why we should all be worried.
Yes. Yeah. Well, story number 4, headline here is White House is pushing ahead research to cool the earth by reflecting back sunlight. Got this from CNBC, and if this sounds familiar...
Real quick, before I get angry emails, Snowpiercer is not James Bond. It is a 2013 post-apocalyptic science fiction film based on the French climate fiction graphic novel. I'm not even going to try to say that, but yeah, okay. So it's a movie, and apparently the same premise. So please continue.
Yes, okay, no worries. And so this is going to sound kind of familiar because back in July, Ben, we talked about a proposal to fight global warming by assembling in space a massive disc-shaped sunlight shield comprised of thousands of individual balloon-like bubbles. You may recall that from back in July. And in fact, as it turns out, that was a proposal out of, guess where? MIT, another MIT thing. But nonetheless, that was one of the first things that I came across personally that really talked about what could we do in this case, in outer space. This is a little different. Now, the administration in Washington wants to explore other ideas. Recently, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy announced they are coordinating a 5-year research plan to study ways of modifying or reflecting the amount of sunlight that reaches the Earth to temper the effects of global warming. And there are several kinds of remarkable, and this was all very big revelation for me, sunlight reflection, sometimes called solar geoengineering technologies, being considered, including, and this was all like ding, 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 new stuff for me. Stratospheric aerosol injection. That sounds kind of scary. Marine cloud brightening. And I have a video here in the show notes for you to check out. And cirrus cloud thinning. All right, let's start with the first one. Stratospheric aerosol injection involves spraying an aerosol like sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere to reflect sunlight. And because it has the potential to affect the entire globe, this idea often gets the most attention, but it's not without controversy if you dig deeper into the story, by the way. And we have a little chart here to remind us about the troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere. You know, the distance is 731 miles, 50 miles up and so forth. So you know where we're talking about. So, and then the next one is marine cloud brightening, also known as marine cloud seeding or marine cloud engineering. And I want to stop and explain, in a few minutes here, we'll understand why it's marine cloud, as in over the oceans, okay?
Right.
So marine cloud brightening is a proposed solar radiation management climate engineering technique that would make clouds brighter, reflecting a small fraction of incoming sunlight back into space to help offset global warming. And I have additional information in the show notes, but I'm going to pull this out of Wikipedia. It's pretty interesting stuff. So I know we're getting a little geeky, a little in-depth here, but I think it's kind of fun. So because I said marine cloud brightening clouds, I've got to know more. So today, emissions particles mix with clouds in the atmosphere and increase the amount of sunlight they reflect, reducing warming. Okay. Marine cloud brightening proposes to generate a similar effect using benign material, for example, sea salt delivered to clouds that are most susceptible to these effects. That being marine stratocumulus clouds over our oceans. Okay. Most clouds are quite reflective, bouncing incoming solar radiation back into space. Clouds consist, of course, of water droplets, and clouds with smaller droplets are more reflective. That's interesting. Cloud condensation nuclei are necessary for water droplet formation. The central idea underlying marine cloud brightening is to add aerosols to atmospheric locations where clouds form. These would then act as cloud condensation nuclei, increasing the cloud albedo. And that I had to look. I should have looked that one up. Maybe you can look that up while we're finished.
Yeah, not libido, albedo. So
albedo, yeah, weird, huh? And the marine environment has a deficit of cloud condensation nuclei due to lower levels of dust and pollution at sea. Isn't that interesting? So marine cloud brightening would be more effective over ocean than over land. In fact, marine cloud brightening on a small scale already occurs unintentionally due to the aerosols in ships, ocean-going ships' exhausts, leaving so-called ship tracks of exhaust. Isn't that interesting?
By the way, albedo is essentially the scientific term for dark absorb light, hot, light reflects sunlight, not so hot. So it's like it's the ability to absorb or reflect light, and then the temperature associated with it. So.
Thank you, sir. Well done. And then last year's cirrus cloud thinning is a proposal which aims to eliminate or thin high-altitude wispy clouds made of ice crystals to allow heat to escape into space. So, Ben, bottom line, in 5 years, when this whole research effort's done, we'll see which approach is deemed the best to pursue. So, who knew? I certainly didn't know anything about these three techniques.
Yep. I was reading an article the other day about this because, I think a lot of people think, oh, we're going to manufacture our own demise by doing something like this. Like the sentence that really stuck out to me was someone, either on Reddit or other social media or whatever, someone said essentially, we have been geoengineering our planet for the past 150 years, unchecked, unresearched, no plan, like just pumping carbon dioxide in immense amounts, just constantly year over year. So it's like people who are saying, well, do we really want to toy with something that may be bigger and out of our control? And it's like, we've been toying with something for the past 150 years. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's time we put someone smarter in charge than just everyone with a gas engine. So.
Yeah, you're so right. Well, think about Ben. Think about coal. Just burning coal for what, 200 years or
Yeah.
more. I mean, when did we start really burning coal like crazy?
Yeah, the Industrial Revolution in Europe. It's, there's been a lot of consequences to that, but I'm also very hopeful, Ralph, and something that I've said on the show often is that technology gets us into a lot of trouble. You know, you can look at, all the different nice ways we have of blowing each other up, but technology, I firmly believe, has a way of saving us as well. And Ralph, if that's, bubbles between the Earth and the sun, if that is, injecting diffuse gases into the stratosphere, which is high above anyone's breathing space, so don't worry about that. Ralph, I really do feel like we have the ability to save ourselves.
And the only downer, I guess, and we don't do downers here, but right. It's great, it's fascinating, but it's also a little sad that instead of getting our act together here on Earth and really solving the problem, we're going to create a kind of solution that lessens the responsibility of humanity, if you follow my drift.
Yeah.
In other words, we'll tinker with the atmosphere because we know people are just not going to give up gasoline and they're just not going to give up coal. So let's get real and figure out some other workaround. But,
I'm sure some other analogy might be like, man repeatedly stabs self in foot. And you're like, well, why don't we just stop stabbing ourselves in the foot? It's like, no, we built this really cool armor-plated shoe that we can wear at all times. It's uncomfortable. It's clunky. It might make us lose the foot, but we can keep stabbing ourselves in the foot. Ralph, I totally understand. I commiserate, but at least we have the shoe that might save us for a little bit. So,
and what I hope, Ben, is that to try to make it uplifting here, to leave on a positive note, it could be a tool in a toolbox of solutions that includes responsibility here on the surface of the Earth, as well as doing what we can out there in the atmosphere.
Yeah, and just like story number 3, all the mice, were able to get 30 days instead of 3 days. It could be something very similar, wherein you get 30 days, or a much longer time to kind of solve our problems, Ralph. To give people a little bit of an uplifting statistic I heard the other day was that this past year, all new energy requirements, so for, because obviously everyone's growing, more people, all of the new energy that we required as a civilization was generated by renewable. Essentially all of it was covered by renewable. So, let's say we needed a 5% increase. That 5% came from renewables. Like renewables cover that completely. So we're not increasing our dependency on fossil fuels. Renewable energy is definitely on the uplift, or at least on the upswing. And Ralph, it's going to get better. We just need a little bit of time. I think so. And this could be that.
Yep.
There you go. So everyone, that's our best way of making things optimistic. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a lot of things to be happy about. There's a lot of things to be excited about. And hey, I hope that you join us here next Friday to hear more about them. So Ralph, I'm glad that you're back. I hope that you had a fun trip and you're ready for, get back into the routine. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll catch you here back next Friday. And until then, everyone, have a good one. Bye-bye.